The sky over Coronado was still pale when the first whistle echoed across the compound. The training yard sat between the barracks and the bay, slick with dew and dusted in salt. Floodlights buzzed overhead, humming in the silence before sunrise. 50 service members stood at attention, boots lined sharp on wet pavement. Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Cross, Navy SEAL, walked the line with a clipboard in hand. Her uniform was clean, her cover pulled low, her tone measured. She called out the day's schedule, naming evolutions in a steady rhythm: trench drag, vertical rope climb, cargo crawl, 11 minutes total. Pairings are pre-assigned. Her voice was calm and absolute, the sound of authority without volume. The Marines and SEALs nodded, eyes front. The smell of nylon webbing and machine oil filled the air. Beyond the lights, the obstacle course waited, a mix of sandbags, ladders, and trenches dug deep into wet soil. It was the kind of morning when breath turned white and metal steamed against cold air. Everything about the scene spoke of order, until a voice cut through it. Careful, boys. The SEAL Barbie looks ready for war. Laughter rolled unevenly through the front ranks. Some bit it back. Others didn't. Staff Sergeant Blake Riker stood with his arms folded, smirk tight on his face. He was a Marine instructor who had seen enough rotations to know exactly how far he could push tone without crossing regulation. Cross turned her head slightly. Not enough to be a confrontation. Only a glance. Out here. Rank spoke louder than gender. She said nothing. Silence spread in her wake. Riker kept smiling. Guess we'll see if the uniform stays clean today. He muttered just loud enough. The sound carried. It was a test. Cross didn't react. She stepped down from the platform, mud crunching under her boots, and gave a single command to begin.com. The teams moved out, calling cadence. The field came alive with noise, grunts, and the metallic ring of rope clips. Riker stayed behind, pretending to observe. He watched her cross toward the trench line, checking carabiner mounts. Her attention was fixed on a mud-clogged clip near the first pit. She crouched to tap it with her pen. That's when he moved closer. Want a hand? Mom, his voice oily, loud enough for others to hear. She didn't look up. She shifted to the left, moving past him. That was when the shove came. 2 hands between the shoulder blades. Forceful, deliberate. Her boots slid. Her knees hit the edge. And then she was gone. The splash was sharp and heavy. Mulflu, soaking her cover and collar. The crowd gasped, then laughed. Phones came out. One Marine raised his screen high, filming the dark shape rising from the trench. Someone whispered, "Damn." She went down hard. The sound spread, feeding on itself until the noise drowned the morning air. Cross stood slowly. Her movements were precise. She brushed nothing away, said nothing. Mud dripped from her sleeve and hair clung to her face. She retrieved her clipboard from the edge, shook it once, and turned toward the line. Her voice cut clean through the noise. Training continues. Move. The laughter broke. A few lowered their phones. Others froze, unsure whether to obey. Cross stepped aside, gave the next command, and the drills resumed under a silence thicker than before. She didn't look at Riker, didn't need to. The strength wasn't in confrontation, but in control. Every motion she made was deliberate, every word timed. Around here, the base slowly remembered discipline. The hum of floodlights filled the space where laughter had been, and in that moment, it was clear to anyone watching that her silence wasn't surrender. It was calculation. By the next morning, the clip had made its way through every corner of the base. Someone had uploaded it from a phone to a group chat, and within an hour it was bouncing between barracks like static. In the Marine wing, it played on repeat across half a dozen screens. The grainy footage showed Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Cross slipping forward, splashing into the trench. Then standing in slow motion, mud dripping down her collar. The caption read, "Lady SEAL learns gravity." Laughter echoed through the room, boots thudding against bunks. Paper, coffee cups crushed in mock applause. For the Marines, it was entertainment. A story of rank and ego turned on its head. In the common room, Corporal Vance Keller sat back on his bunk, watching the clip again. Around him, others were laughing, replaying the splash, sharing versions with music edits and slow zooms. Keller didn't join in. He watched her face, not the fall. The way she stood. No flinch. No anger. No visible reaction. Just the two words she spoke, before turning away. Training continues. He rewound it once, eyes narrowing slightly. That's not embarrassment, he said quietly. The laughter around him didn't stop, but no one answered. Across the compound, in the SEAL ready room, the mood was different. The air smelled of oil and canvas, the low hum of a dehumidifier running in the corner. Petty Officer Logan Mendez leaned against the wall, arms folded, eyes fixed on the same video, playing silently on a tablet. Around him, two SEALs sat watching. "How many people do you think have seen it?" one asked. "Enough," Mendez replied. "They're all missing the point." He paused the video. She saw him coming. She let him do it. Confused looks followed. Why would she let that happen? Because now it's documented. Her word doesn't need to compete with his anymore. Mendez pushed off the wall. Voice even. "I served under her 2 years ago in Syria. Operation Ironhawk. She took a round to the vest pulling a pilot out of a burning Humvee. Never told anyone until we were wheels up." One of the younger SEALs stared down at the paused frame. "She doesn't do reaction. She does results." Mendez nodded once. Riker thinks he embarrassed her. What he did was give her exactly what she needed. The room went still. The only sound, the faint buzz of the overhead light. Keller's laughter down the hall seemed like another world. Inside the ready room, there was only quiet understanding. Mendez glanced toward the door. "She's not angry," he said softly. "She's calculating." The laundry bay was nearly empty at 2100 hours. Only the hum of the fluorescent lights and the slow rhythm of the dryers filled the air. Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Cross stood at the far sink, sleeves rolled to her elbows, scrubbing the mud from her uniform jacket. The water was hot, steaming around her hands. The smell of detergent thick enough to taste. Her movements were small and deliberate, as if the world outside the room did not exist. Each stroke of the brush erased a layer of dirt, but none of the memory. The door hissed open and closed again. Footsteps crossed the tile. Slow and unsure, Petty Officer Miguel Torres appeared in the reflection of the window. His posture straight, but his voice quiet. He said the video was everywhere. What started as a joke had turned into something else. People were editing it, adding music, turning it into memes. He waited for a reaction, but Cross gave none. She rinsed the jacket, wrung it out, and hung it from the pipe above the sink. The dripping water was the only answer. Torres shifted. Rubbing the back of his neck, he said he found a phone on the bleachers after training, left unlocked. It belonged to a Marine. The original video was on it. Time stumped. Geo-tagged. Audio intact. He said he copied the file, then took the phone, called it confiscated evidence. Cross finally turned to look at him. Her expression didn't change. "You stole it," she said. He replied that he didn't steal anything, just secured proof before someone erased it. She dried her hands on a towel and reached for the phone, folded it into the fabric. Placing it neatly beside the sink, "Proof has weight," she said. Weight crush noise. The sentence landed like a command, not a reflection. Torres nodded once. As if saluting something unspoken, he turned and left without another word. Cross stood alone again. Sleeves damp. Steam rising around her. She picked up the brush and went back to work. The sound of scrubbing filled the silence. Steady and calm. The same rhythm as her breathing. Outside, the base settled into night. But inside that room, discipline stayed awake. The office smelled faintly of coffee and paper. The blinds were half drawn, letting in strips of pale light that fell across the desk, stacked with training reports and personnel files. The clock on the wall read 7:15 a.m. The base outside was just beginning to wake. The sound of morning drills echoing through the courtyard. Inside the Joint Training Command building, the air felt still, almost surgical. Petty Officer Miguel Torres stood at attention just inside the doorway. The phone wrapped in a microfiber cloth, held in both hands. Commander Ronan Tate looked up from his paperwork without a word. He was a tall man in his 50s. Expression calm but unreadable. Torres stepped forward. Placing the phone on the desk, Tate unwrapped it, turned it over once, then powered it on. The hum of the overhead light filled the silence as he opened the file. For 17 seconds, only the faint sounds of splashing and laughter played from the small speaker. Tate replayed it. Then again. His eyes didn't change. He finally asked how many copies existed. Torres said quietly that a few Marines had shared versions, but none with the original timestamp or audio. Tate nodded once and told him to secure the device, copy the original to his command terminal, and erase all other traces. Torres stood still, waiting for more. Tate leaned back in his chair, fingers pressed together. He said this couldn't end with paperwork. The situation was no longer about personal insult or embarrassment. It was about control. Order. The base had lost both, and now it would have to see what correction looked like. He told Torres that at 1600 hours, there would be a controlled correctional demonstration inside Warehouse 2. It would be under training regulation. Fully documented. No retribution. Just procedure. Torres acknowledged the order, gave a short nod, and left. Tate remained seated, the phone still on the desk. The screen dark again. He pulled a form from the top drawer and typed the subject line slowly. Eyes steady. Controlled correctional demonstration. Warehouse 2. 1600 hours. When he hit print, the machine behind him came to life. Gears turning. Paper sliding out one sheet at a time. The sound of it filled the room like the start of something deliberate. Outside, the flag stirred in the wind. Inside, the chain of command had begun to move. The air inside Warehouse 2 felt heavier than usual. The wide concrete floor was cleared of gear. The walls stripped of storage racks. Red hazard tape outlined a square at the center. Perfectly measured. Every corner marked by small yellow cones. Overhead. Fluorescent lights buzzed in rows. Pale and constant. 2 tripod-mounted cameras faced the taped square, their lenses steady under the supervision of Commander Ronan Tate. At precisely 1600 hours, the large steel doors at the back rolled open, and a wave of muted footsteps echoed through the space. Marines and SEALs filed in quietly, lining the perimeter. Nobody spoke above a whisper. The tension was thick, disciplined, the kind that only came when everyone understood that something real was about to happen. Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Cross stood inside the marked zone, posture straight, hands clasped lightly behind her back. Her uniform was immaculate, cover set at the correct angle, boots polished, even though no one had expected her to care about polish anymore. Her expression gave nothing away. Across the floor, Staff Sergeant Blake Riker entered last. His sleeves were rolled high, fatigue jacket unbuttoned at the collar, grin carved onto his face as though to convince himself it still fit. He muttered something to a nearby Marine and laughed. But the sound didn't travel far. Commander Tate stood on the platform near the far wall, clipboard in hand. He addressed the gathered personnel with the calm cadence of someone reciting procedure. This is a controlled correctional demonstration under authorized joint training regulation. The objective is instructional, not punitive. His voice didn't rise, but every word cut clean. Riker smirked. Shifting his weight from one boot to the other, Cross didn't move. Tate turned to her and nodded. Lieutenant Commander Cross. Proceed as briefed. She stepped forward, signaling to two Marines standing by. The first Marine entered the square, shoulders tense. Tate called for the cameras to start. Cross gave a short command. Engage. The Marine advanced, leading with his right hand, a standard test grip. Cross redirected it smoothly, pivoting on her left foot. Using his own forward momentum to off-balance him, she turned her hip and dropped him gently onto the mat, pinning him momentarily before stepping back. The sound of contact was solid but clean. Tate gave the cue to reset. The second Marine stepped in. Moving more cautiously, he attempted a low sweep. Cross adjusted, trapping his elbow and guiding him down with precise leverage control. The Marine exhaled sharply as his shoulder touched the concrete, but there was no harm done. She released him immediately, offering a professional nod before stepping back again. From the sideline, Riker called out with a smirk, "That's what we're calling combat now." His voice echoed in the stillness. Tate's gaze flicked toward him, but he said nothing. Cross turned just enough to meet Riker's eyes. "You're welcome to participate, Sergeant." The challenge was quiet, not bait. Tate gave the faintest nod. One contact round. Rotation control only. No strikes. No ground engagement. Both acknowledged. The silence stretched thin. Riker stepped inside the square, rolling his shoulders, trying to look relaxed. The sound of his boots against the floor carried like small explosions in the empty room. Cross remained centered. Hands down. Stance neutrale. Tate raised his hand. Begin. Riker started slow, circling, looking for weakness. He threw feints, quick steps, minor grabs meant to test her reaction. Cross didn't move. Her stillness unnerved him. The onlookers watched without blinking. Then Riker turned halfway, pretending to disengage. In the same instant, he lunged forward from behind her, both hands aimed high between the shoulder blades, mimicking the trench shove. It was fast and sharp, fueled by memory and pride. But this time, Cross was ready. She dropped low, twisting to her right, catching his wrist mid-motion. Her hips turned fluidly as she redirected his energy forward. The motion was clean, efficient, almost mechanical. Riker's boots left the floor for a brief second before his body hit the mat with a sharp thud that echoed across the warehouse. She followed through, one knee pressing lightly into his ribs, his wrist locked beneath her palm at an angle that froze him in place. His breath caught the fight, leaving his body in a single exhale. Cross leaned in slightly, air voice low, steady, and clear enough for the microphones to capture. "This is why you never attack from behind." Nobody spoke. Even the lights seemed to hum quieter. Cross stood, adjusting her collar, hair expression unchanged. Riker lay still for a moment before rolling to his side, red creeping up his neck. Tate's voice broke the silence with a calm authority. "Control established. End of demonstration." One of the camera operators clicked off the record light. Cross stepped back to her starting position, standing tall. Posture perfect. There was no pride in her stance, no victory in her face, just order. Tate wrote something on his clipboard and gave a small nod. Dismissed. Around the perimeter, Marines and SEALs exchanged looks, but said nothing. The shift in the room was almost tangible. What had begun as curiosity had turned into respect. The noise, the mockery, the quiet rivalry that had fueled the last 2 days, all of it was gone. In its place was a silence that felt earned. Cross walked toward the edge of the square, boots striking softly against the floor. Riker remained kneeling, eyes fixed on the ground. When she reached the exit, she paused for half a second, scanning the room one last time. No arrogance, no satisfaction, only calm control, the kind that couldn't be taught in manuals or corrected by rank. Outside the warehouse, the crowd began to disperse, slower than they had come. Inside, the air still carried the echo of that single, precise takedown. A reminder that real authority doesn't need volume. It just needs timing. The conference room was silent except for the low hum of the air conditioning. The walls were bare except for a flag and a command insignia plaque that hung just above the head of the table. The clock read 8:30 a.m. Commander Ronan Tate sat in the center seat. Posture straight, eyes sharp. Two junior officers flanked him, one typing quietly on a tablet while the other prepared the case file. Across the table sat Staff Sergeant Blake Riker and the two Marines who had filmed and circulated the trench video. Their uniforms were pressed. But the stiffness wasn't pride. It was tension. Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Cross sat at the far end, calm, uniform crisp, her hands resting neatly on the table. Tate began without preface. He powered on the monitor, the screen flashing to life with the unedited trench footage. The shove, the laughter, the sound of mud hitting water. No one spoke as the clip played. When it ended, he cued the next video. The warehouse demonstration. The camera showed Riker lunging, the pivot, the throw, the silence. The entire scene lasted less than 10 seconds. When it finished, Tate folded his hands. He asked if anyone believed the demonstration was exaggerated or unfairly represented. No one answered. He turned his attention to Riker. Do you believe shoving a superior officer into a trench during joint training aligns with Marine Corps discipline? Riker's mouth opened, then closed again. His voice came out rough. It does not. Sire. Tate nodded once. Intent is not what's on trial here. Impact is. He shifted his gaze to the Marines beside him. You filmed an assault on a superior and distributed it for entertainment. That qualifies as digital misconduct and unit discredit under Article 15. Their faces tightened. Tate continued. Your devices will be secured as evidence. You are both restricted from communication systems until further notice. Then to Riker. You are hereby suspended from all joint training operations, pending formal review by the Command Advisory Board. Riker looked down, jaw flexing, but silent. Tate finally turned toward Cross. Lieutenant Commander Cross, your restraint during the incident and subsequent demonstration was exemplary. Command is submitting a commendation for professionalism under provocation. She shook her head once. Correction was enough. Tate gave a small nod. Understood. He closed the folder and said simply, Session adjourned. Chair slid back. The sound echoing through the sterile room. No one spoke as they stood. When Cross rose, the Marines lowered their eyes. Riker stayed seated a second longer, his hands clasped tight, before following suit. The sense of justice that filled the room wasn't loud or triumphant. It was quiet, heavy, and complete. The hallway outside the conference room was long, pale, and silent. The air smelled faintly of polish and recycled air. Along the walls hung framed portraits of past commanders and plaques no one had looked at in years. Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Cross walked down the corridor with measured steps, hands behind her back, eyes fixed straight ahead. She carried no folders, no evidence of what had just taken place. Her uniform was flawless, her pace steady. A few administrative officers glanced up as she passed, straightening instinctively before lowering their gaze again. Near the end of the hall, a bench sat against the wall beneath an old command emblem. Staff Sergeant Blake Riker was there, sleeves rolled, boots scuffed, elbows resting on his knees. He looked smaller than he had the day before. As Cross moved past him, he spoke quietly, his voice rough. Guess you got your revenge. She paused half a step, just enough to answer. No. I got accuracy. Then she walked on. Commander Ronan Tate waited near the elevator. Arms folded. He didn't smile. Riker will say, "It was personal," he said as the doors opened. Cross met his eyes. "It wasn't." Tate nodded once. "That's why it worked." She stepped into the elevator, pressed the button, and said she wanted the first training slot on Monday. Tate replied, "You'll have it." The doors closed. The echo of her footsteps faded into silence, leaving only the hum of the hallway and the quiet weight of resolution. The morning light settled softly over the training field. The same ground where laughter had once filled the air, the trench still cut through the dirt, dark and wet from the sprinklers. The ropes still hung from their frames. But something about the place had changed. The noise was gone. The posture of every Marine and SEAL waiting in formation was sharper, quieter, almost reverent. The air carried a kind of discipline that didn't come from orders but from understanding. Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Cross stood near the edge of the trench, uniform pressed, cover squared, boots spotless. Her hands were clasped neatly behind her back, eyes scanning the field without a hint of emotion. The whistle hung from her wrist, glinting in the sun. Behind her, Petty Officer Miguel Torres approached with a cup of coffee. He stopped beside her. Voice low. "No one's filming today." Cross didn't look at him. "They're staying clear because they don't want to be in the next one." Torres glanced at the mud, then at her. "Looks cleaner out here." She gave the smallest nod. "Clean is just perspective." The whistle blew. The first team dropped into the trench, boots hitting mud, hands gripping the ropes. Cross called commands evenly, her tone clear, firm, and unshakable. The rhythm of her voice guided the movement. Not loud, but absolute. Around here, instructors moved with purpose. No laughter. No whispers. No stray glances. Every eye stayed on the task. Every order followed without hesitation. The same field that had been a stage for mockery now carried weight and respect. As the sound of training filled the air, a calm voice from the narration returned. "Would you have stayed silent if someone humiliated you in front of your entire unit? Do you think control means walking away? Or standing still until the world adjusts around you?" Share this story with someone who still thinks silence is weakness. Hit like, subscribe, and stay ready for the next mission. Because strength doesn't always speak. Sometimes it waits. In the end, this story was never about revenge. It was about control. Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Cross showed that real strength doesn't come from shouting or striking back. It comes from holding steady when everyone else loses balance. She proved that silence can carry more authority than noise, and that patience is not weakness, but power waiting for its moment. What she did was not retaliation. It was correction. Every soldier, every leader, faces moments where pride dares them to react. But control is the highest form of courage. Discipline doesn't shout. It waits. It studies. It executes. Cross reminded everyone that leadership isn't built on ego. It's built on the ability to stand still when the world tries to shake you. Timing wins battles. Ego starts them. So ask yourself, what would you have done when someone mocks you, disrespects you, or underestimates you? Do you fight for your pride or wait for your precision? Sometimes silence isn't surrender. It's the sound of a storm waiting for its cue. If this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes control looks like weakness. Hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe so you never miss the next mission. The next story is already waiting.